Well, now let's bring in our panel of political commentators to look at some of the key issues of the day. Joining me tonight, Bill Pristanski, a Conservative commentator. Robin McLaughlin is an NDP commentator, and Greg McEachern is a Liberal commentator. Good to see you all. Thanks for being with me. Bill Pristanski, let me start with you. We've seen the latest now on this ongoing battle between Conservatives on the Ethics Committee and the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation over access to information and whether members of Parliament should be allowed to see what the CBC is not showing to other people in these access to information requests. So let's start there. Why should committee members be looking at documents that are part of a court battle involving the CBC and the Information Commissioner?
Well, what has the CBC got to hide? I mean, obviously, you know, I'm a Conservative and I firmly believe that the CBC is biased, but, you know, don't take my word for it and don't take Dean Del Mastro's word for it. I mean, let's take a look at the facts here. I mean, they spent well over $15 million over 10 years trying to prove that something was there with Mr. Mulroney in his case, and as it turns out, the Oliphant inquiry said there was nothing there. And then they spent how much money on Montgomery? Much less. Why? Peter, you've seen them yourselves. There's at least 12 documentaries on Pierre Trudeau, his life, his legacy. How many documentaries have they done on Brian Mulroney?
Oh,
zero. So this is a very biased organization.
I know,
and they obviously don't want to show the people of Canada what's going on, and they've got something to hide.
I know what you're thinking, but what I'm asking is, and this is a particular fight where the Conservatives on the committee have taken up the cause of Quebecor and its battle with the CBC over these access to information documents, and the battle with the Information Commissioner. And she's fighting the CBC in court over these documents. Isn't that where it belongs? And if it's in court, why should it be before a committee?
Well, I guess the committee wants to find out what's on these documents as well. Why not? Why shouldn't the members of Parliament know? I mean, last year, I mean, out of nowhere, this is a corporation that's crying out for, you know, we don't have enough money, but they could put $1 million in some opera that went nowhere. I mean, it's being mismanaged, and they're trying to prove to Canadians.
What's your point? That documentation would show that?
The documentation should all be made public so that people can see that there's wasteful things going on at the CBC.
Robin, what's your view on this?
It's very dangerous, and I think the top legal team at Parliament Hill, the law clerk for parliamentary law
House of Commons has
said that, you know, they're flying very close to the important separation between the judicial branch and legislative branches of government. Here we have a quick case that's before the courts. A resolution will be forthcoming in that regard, and the Conservatives can't wait. They don't want to wait for the judicial process to run its course, and they want to bring the CBC before their kangaroo court of committees. And this is wrong. The access to information laws do have an exemption in there for you know, journalistic freedoms and important issues like creative protection of sources, and so there aren't the same set of complete open rules that apply to that, and there's a good reason for that. I mean, there's freedom of the press is a very important freedom that we enjoy in this country, and it contributes to our democracy.
Greg?
I'm still kind of a little bit in shock of what Bill just said about the CBC, but I guess in some ways it's nice to see that at least you're being honest, because I think there's a lot of Conservatives that have an ideological axe to grind with the CBC, and maybe they're trying to fight that battle in different ways. Robin just pointed out the legal jurisdiction that they're bumping up against. Just quickly, this is the Conservative government that is criticizing another organization about how they're releasing items under the access to information. Now, let's just let the irony of that sink in for a while. As the last, 7 years, we've seen access to information requests slow down and even stop in some cases where staffers were brought before committees because it was revealed that they were actually blocking information from being revealed. So the Conservatives aren't in really a great place to lecture anybody else about access to information.
Or redacted documents.
Exactly. In terms of the CBC, I can't let this go. I feel like I've got to defend this. I grew up in a part of the country where we could only get the CBC until I was in about grade 3. And I don't live, I didn't grow up that far from a Trans-Canada highway. The Conservatives love to talk about from C to C to C. Well, there's only one organization that's able to talk to those people in their language. The health minister, for example, up north can talk to her community in her language thanks to the CBC. So I really find it really suspect that the Conservatives want to try to do this from in a backhanded way to kind of diminish them. The thing is that they name some, they talk about a bias. One of the journalists they name was the biggest thorn in the side of the Chrétien Liberal government, and now he's a thorn in the side of this one.
I guess there's a deal.
Welcome to the NFL.
I guess there's a danger in going too far down them. I mean, you don't like the CBC. You think
we like the institution. We don't like the wasteful spending.
Right, and you think it's a cherished icon. But I don't. With respect, I don't think the argument's really about whether the CBC is a valuable operation for Canadians. What it really is it
we
not?
think it's valuable too.
Is this not a discussion over what parliamentarians should have the right to see when it involves a court case that's ongoing, where you then have, essentially, do you not have parliamentarians sitting as the judge, looking at the same documents, and then what happens if you have a ruling from the Federal Court of Appeal involving the Information Commissioner and the CBC that the Conservatives don't like? Then what? We look at these sealed documents and they go, well, we saw the same documents and we think the court's wrong. I mean, doesn't that undermine the whole judicial process?
Well, they want to see if there's wasteful spending. They want to see if there's a bias, and they are bringing it's a crown corporation. They get voted money every year. So parliamentarians do have a right to ask questions about the management of the CBC.
When it's about the Conservative Party. For example, my understanding is when questions were asked with the in and out scandal, and they would try to bring it up in the House or in committee, then the Conservatives would say, well, it's before the courts. It's easy for the Conservatives to hide behind it when it works for them, and in this case, they're running into dangerous territory, I think.
And the gun registry is going to be gone as one of their main fundraisers. The CBC is the next, actually, I think it was even above the gun registry in terms of the issues that the Conservatives love to use to fire up their base. This is a moneymaker for Conservatives. Beating up on the CBC, they don't want it to go away. They love the CBC. Beating up on the CBC helps raise money. It helps get their base mobilized. So this is exactly what this is. They can't wait for the court cases. Okay. They want to deal with this right now and in public forum and just be able to use it as a punching bag.
Let's shift to the Canada-U.S. relations, Bill, and we've seen now the Americans have essentially halted the Keystone XL pipeline project.
Postponed the decision.
Well, at least till 2013 before we get a decision. Right. And that doesn't say whether it'll be a go or not. It just says we won't find out for another 2 years. Is that a sign? And now we have the Prime Minister saying, well, then we'll look to ship our oil to Asian markets. Is that a sign of growing and perhaps more serious tensions in the relationship between Canada and the U.S.?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, I think that President Obama and the Prime Minister had a healthy discussion when they were at the APEC summit in Hawaii on the weekend, and I think that you'll see that there will be a major announcement on likely on the perimeter agreement in December when the Prime Minister visits the White House. So there's lots of issues, there always are, between Canada and the United States. Certainly, if this pipeline was to be turned down, I think it could be seen to be contrary to the energy chapter in the NAFTA. So the Americans better be very, very careful how they handle this, and I'm sure the Prime Minister has pointed that out to President Obama. But I think we've been caught up in the election sweepstakes in the United States, and I think that this was just a move to take this off the table
till after the presidential election.
But the problem is the private sector has to move forward. And so, the Prime Minister, I'm sure, made it quite clear to the President on the weekend that Canada will be looking at building a pipeline to the Pacific, and that we will have another another client, because right now we lose $50 million a day based on the difference between the world price and what the Americans are prepared to pay for our oil.
Well, it's certainly interesting any time that you see the Flaherty-Harper strategy of threatening the United States by cozying up to communist China. I find that interesting, if not probably an effective strategy. But in reference to the Northern Gateway and the pipeline that's proposed to bring oil to the West Coast,
which is in the proposal stage, and would
I don't know.
You'd have to say would be years away.
I can't see that it's any closer to the Keystone decision. I think that it has many huge hurdles to overcome. I mean, you're talking about bringing a pipeline across the Rockies to the West Coast. So I think that this is more posturing from the government on trade, as opposed to actually trying to, and they're trying to, take a bad week. It was a bad week last week, and it culminated in the American decision to delay the Keystone pipeline decision. And I think that Harper and Flaherty are trying to make that that look better, but it's...
How can the NDP say it's a bad week when the NDP are saying, you know, your leadership contender number one, Brian Tops, is saying close down the entire operation in Western Canada. He's saying no more oil sands, we're going to have a moratorium on growth. So why do you care about that? Why do you say it's a bad week?
From the point of view of the government, it was a bad week. I think that's what
pleading guilty in court.
I think Canada got out lobbied by one state in particular, and it does raise some questions about our presence in Washington. I mean, if you look at the 1980s, where we had major issues like acid rain, free trade, we had a very strong presence in Ottawa, in Washington.
Thanks to Brian Mulroney.
Well, actually, he was appointed by Pierre Trudeau, and it was Ambassador Gottlieb, and he was
free trade. Let me just step right in. The free trade agreement and the acid rain agreement. But wait a minute, I got to correct this.
This is clearly a sign of
Brian Mulroney did both
strained relations in our panel.
I'll give you this. I mean, Mulroney left him there. I mean, it was, you know, he was appointed by one prime minister from one party and left there for another one.
Your point is that this guy, you believe this government dropped the ball on managing this.
Celebrity-style ambassadors, you know, former premiers of that nature. Maybe it's time we have somebody in Washington, nothing against the current one, but maybe the stakes have changed, and maybe it's time that we have somebody that's a little bit more vocal for Canada's interests.
All right, I'll have to leave it on that note. We're out of time. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll see you soon.